Yeah, okay.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Smug and Play, YouTube's premier show about Win 9X gaming culture and technology. We are playing through all of PC Gamer's demo discs starting from the very beginning. And we've now arrived in June of 1995. School is out for the summer and we are ready to play some games. But why don't we talk a little bit about what we've been up to on the channel before we really dig into it. I recently released a video about a Windows 2000 era gaming build I put together for my friend Chris. And my brother and co-host, please introduce yourself.
I'm Alan. Nice to meet you.
Thought it would be a great idea to troll me in the comments of the video. So why don't you talk about that?
Oh, I didn't want to talk about either of those two things. I wanted to talk... Trolling is negative. That's not nice to you. I want to talk about great things. So two things. One is the incredible years that were 1999, 2000 in terms of technology.
Fantastic, huge leaps forward in those years. What specifically did you want to call it?
Well, in March 99, so a year before your Coppermine 1 gigahertz came out, the best processor you could buy was a Pentium 3 500 with... the cache ran at half speed, so you know, slow.
Yeah.
But by March 2000, not the fastest. By March 2000, you know, we had 1 gigahertz offerings from both AMD and Intel. Yeah. The Intel one had full speed on die cache, so you didn't just have the higher frequency. You also got on die cache. So a lot of things going on, and that's just from competition. Sadly, we're kind of in this mid-90s thing here with 1995, and there's competition, but it's not the same kind. Like the competition in processors going on right now is just segmentation, where Intel's taking the high end, and AMD and Cyrix are taking the budget sort of low-end system,
which happens for long periods of personal computing history, right? We're just now exiting another period where we have the same market segmentation with Intel at the top charging a premium for their products that have higher IPC or instructions per clock, and then AMD being more of a budget offering, more of a value offering below it. And it's just now that with the latest generation Ryzen processors, AMD can challenge everything. And AMD is beating Intel at every price point, which hasn't happened for a very long time and won't happen on this show for quite some time either. But 2000 was a time where, man, it was really neck and neck. I mean, it's not even really clear who hit a gigahertz first, exactly who shipped first.
Well, AMD got the press release out first.
AMD got the press release for their 1 gigahertz T-Bird, and I think that thing had a serious cooling solution on it, as I recall.
It actually wasn't a T-Bird in March 2000.
What did they have?
This was still slot with backside. T-Bird came out in summer.
Oh, right, they're still slot A.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
man.
this was the fastest slot A they came out with was a gigahertz. But that aside, by 99. Both Intel and AMD were competitive in high-end and budget, too, because Intel came out with the Celeron. So a lot of funky stuff happened in those years because they were all just rushing stuff to market. Which kind of gets to your point. I trolled a little bit about the chipset.
And we should talk about this. I mean, Intel really tripped over themselves. When they introduced the 133 megahertz front-side bus CPUs, they didn't have a full range, really, of 133 megahertz front-side bus offerings, or at least not the ones people wanted, right?
Well, actually, I'm technically, when the first 133 megahertz bus came out, they actually released it on Katmai chips. I don't know why. It seemed like a desperate measure.
Really?
But they actually didn't have any chipset at the time.
So at the time, VIA was the one that offered 133 megahertz front-side bus chipset. The VIA Apollo chipset was what you had to get if you wanted 133 megahertz frontside bus, and it wasn't. Usually, it's Intel that's pushing standards like USB and PCI, but in the case of the PC 133 RAM standard, it was actually VIA that got the industry to create that standard, and so Intel really lagging and letting VIA is usually again, with the segmentation, VIA is usually a lagging behind budget, chipset offering, company. They're not the industry leader. You're not who you expect to be in the lead at this point. And so, Intel stumbles in this period.
Yeah.
And kind of recovers their footing with some fast Pentium 3s and the i8-15 chipset, but i8-20 Camino was a bit of a disaster.
Well, it was really weird because the i8-20 Camino with the RDRAM, and Intel, I guess, sold their soul to the devil and had to sell RDRAM.
Yeah.
It actually was supposed to come out when those first 133 frontside bus processors came out, but it wasn't actually ready because there was an issue with RAM bus. They had to pull the third RIM slot at the last second,
right.
And so that was already delayed by a month. They also came out with a version with it that ran PC100 SD RAM, but obviously there was no reason to buy the processor with 133
right.
frontside bus. And they released that a few months later, and then they had to completely withdraw it and recall it within, 5 or 6 months of that. And it wasn't until summer of 2000 that they actually had a practical viable
functioning chipset. The thing is, and by that you mean the 815.
Yes, the one that you used.
So they introduced a couple of boards, kind of what they consider low-end boards, because they're still calling the RAM bus solution sort of their high-end solution, but the 810 and the i8-15. The i8-10 has 133 megahertz frontside bus. It can do 133 megahertz RAM, SD RAM, but it doesn't have a fucking AGP slot. It's PCI, and that's it. And because the idea is it's low-end offering, it has a built-in GPU on the North Bridge, and that's what they expected people to do, that they bought this as an integrated solution and they're just going to slot in a NIC or something. They may have had integrated NIC. I know the 815, almost all the 815s have integrated NIC and integrated AC97 audio, and they also have integrated video, but at least on the 815, you have an AGP slot, it can turn into an enthusiast platform. But I mean, 815 has problems too. Looking through the manual for this D815 EFV board, I think you can only run PC133 in 2 slots. I think it's got 3 RAM slots, but you can't run 133 megahertz if you have 3 DIMMs installed. You can only run it at 100 with 3 DIMMs, or you can run it at 133 with 2, up to 2.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, VIA looks pretty good.
Well, the thing is, the VIA had some performance issues that kind of offset
the AGP AppGuard stuff. You have all these unstable drivers, and AGP. Sometimes you have to slow the speed down. There are all sorts of weird issues with it. Whereas Intel's at least had the driver situation down. Like when I installed Windows Millennium Edition came with the 815 drivers on the disk, and there were no updates. If you download Intel's new drivers, it will just tell you that you have the latest drivers available for 815. And I didn't have any problems with, on the driver side. Whereas with VIA, it's like, well, do I use the foreign ones? Do I use Hyperion? Like, what do I install on this thing? And you might, especially with Radeon cards or something, you can still end up with all sorts of problems. Well, some other things.
Or your Rage Fury Max.
Rage Fury Max with 2 X's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wrapping this up, I think the 815 is the only practical chipset for a 133 megahertz frontside bus. But there's something that's unsatisfying about it to me, just because this is my personal rant here. But it feels like the 815 and everything after kind of has one foot in the future. And this is a retro gaming podcast. By a foot in the future, it has integrated graphics, integrated sound, highly integrated internet, no ISA. There were some motherboards that had it, but it had to have a bridge chip, so it wasn't native.
Yes, it's not on the South Bridge. You have to have a bridge chip to get ISA. Yeah, it's not for the DOS era. It's really forward looking. It says forget all about DOS. We're not gonna put the hardware in here that's gonna make this a great cross-compatible DOS machine. That was what was great about the 440 BX and ZX chipsets. So you usually got 1 or 2 ISAs hanging off the end. So you could slot in a Sound Blaster Live and a Sound Blaster 64, some ISA sound card, and you could get great mix of performance in Windows and compatibility in DOS, and you can kind of live in both eras. And that, I think that's great. That's great for us. But yeah, this is not. And the other thing is, like, at the time the 815 chipset came out, of course, what all the magazines and what all the websites like Anantech did is that they benched it against 440BX motherboard overclocked to 133 megahertz front-sided RAM, and the BX outperforms it. Now, part of the reason why it outperforms it is because you don't have the right dividers for the AGP bus. So if you're running a 133 megahertz front-side bus on a 440BX, you're running your AGP at 89 megahertz instead of 66. So you can actually, weasel a little bit extra performance out of cards that can handle it.
Yeah, I don't think it was that. I think the BX has a slightly better memory controller, and it's only a difference of like 3 or 4%. So
yeah.
But
it's not a big deal. And let's be clear that it wasn't like every 440BX board could go to 133 with no problems. It wasn't. I know that that's what the internet wants everyone to believe, that all you had to do was get any 440BX board, and then you hit the magic 133 button, and then your 300 megahertz Celeron's now running at 500, and no,
I think 600. You mean?
That would be sick. Good luck with that. That wouldn't work at all. We're going to edit that out. What I meant is that your 800 megahertz Pentium 3 is now running at a gigahertz. It was 8 times 100. It's now 8 times 133. But these things, in practice, these things didn't always work perfectly.
Nothing worked perfectly, and tying up my entire thread here. Like, a lot of weird stuff happened in this era. After the 1 gigahertz processor came out, Intel released a 1.13, which didn't work, and they had to recall that too. And so I think it's just a fun era of, like, there's desperate competition and making rather large mistakes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which was fun. It's fun to see companies screw up hard and make opportunities for other companies. I know I said that we weren't going to talk about current events or technological developments anymore, but given that we do typically segment the show into a talk section and a play and talk section, and we're still in the talk section, there was a lot of stuff going on in June of 1995. Right, last month we saw the E3 Electronic Entertainment Expo. I believe it was the first E3 that had been held, and there were some big announcements there. Sega announced that the Saturn is available right now, and Sony said you're gonna have to wait a little bit longer for PlayStation in the US, but we're gonna undercut Sega by $100, and so just hold on. So the media is feeding us images of consumer 3D like we've never seen it before. You can now play Virtua Fighter in your living room, which is inconceivable, right? That's a very expensive high-spec arcade machine just a year or two back. And so people on the PC side are obviously starting to wonder, okay, when is it our turn? We've got Doom, we have things like that, but we don't have a lot of, real-time 60 frame per second polygonal graphics happening over here on our expensive PCs. And so some companies have seen this opportunity and are rushing to fill in that gap. And the first player really to throw their hat into the PC 3D accelerator arena here is NVIDIA. NVIDIA was founded in 1993, and it said nothing. It's been quiet.
Yeah, and they were founded before 3DFX, so they had.
Yes.
That's why their product came out a year earlier.
Right.
Faithfully,
they also had a very different approach, but yeah, they were founded. Yeah. They were founded before 3DFX by Jensen Huang, a Taiwanese American engineer who had worked at LSI in their coreware department, and some electrical engineers that he'd worked with on these SunSpark microstations graphics. So they're coming with that sort of Sun graphics and LSI sort of system integration expertise, and they have this vision, or Jensen Huang in his videos that I've watched has this vision of 3D graphics on the PC being used to tell stories in a way that hasn't been possible before, and to do so interactively. We've seen the power of 3D graphics in theaters, in movies, recent movies like Jurassic Park. Now we want to see what we can do with interactive 3D graphics in the home. So NVIDIA has flown out of stealth to tell us about their NV1 architecture. And they haven't told us too much at this point in June, but what they've said is that it is based on a 1 million transistor, 500 nanometer or 0.5 micron chip. And it has GUI acceleration, wavetable sound synthesis, video acceleration, 3D acceleration, and a game port, all rolled into one board that is probably going to cost a whole lot of money, because how can you have so many of those things in there? But I mean, the idea is that you take a boring, spreadsheet box, and then this thing will do everything. You don't have to. It'll be your Windows accelerator, it'll be your 3D graphics accelerator, it'll play sound, you plug your joystick into it.
And more than game port, it was like Sega Saturn controller ports.
Well, I don't think that's actually been announced at this point. I think they staggered their announcements. First they just tell us we've got a 1 million transistor ASIC. It's built on a 500 nanometer process with ST Micro is going to be our fab partner, and this is all the stuff it can do, and we're going to follow up more info later. And in July, they actually talk about partnerships. But the most important thing they talked about in terms of the 3D acceleration is that this is a chip that natively renders textured quads and has 5 control points per quad to render curvature. Now, this is not the way things are rendered normally.
Wait, quads with curvature?
Quads with curvature.
Interesting.
Right? So this is a really different approach to rendering than what we're seeing on Silicon Graphics workstations and that we're going to see on the Sony PlayStation. But it is very similar to the sort of rendering that we see in Sega's arcade machines and in their brand new Sega Saturn console. Texture map quads. Texture map quads have some advantages if you can't put too much stuff on your silicon because you're running a big silicon process and you're trying to do things like draw sprites as well as texture map, as well as handle proper Z ordering and perspective correction. If you want to do all that, texture map quads can be a pretty decent
and a big problem was memory, both size and bandwidth, right?
Yeah, so size and bandwidth, because right now DRAM is super expensive. And if you have to find some cheap way to solve the depth issue. If you create a depth buffer, a Z buffer as they're called, you're adding a huge amount of additional memory that you need for every single pixel. Because what you really want to spend, that expensive DRAM, what you really want to do is you want to use it for your frame buffer and for your textures and pretty much nothing else, right? You want to have a ton of geometry data taking up space. And if you're trying to make things that are more or less boxes, you only got 4 vertices on a quad. You need 6 to make a quad out of 2 triangles. And if you're trying to approximate curved surfaces and things like that, then you can use control points instead of additional polygons. These things save you memory size, memory bandwidth, and so that this is a very interesting sounding architecture. The question is this going to be future proof? Is this going to deliver, even Sega Saturn quality graphics on what machine? What's the overhead going to be for PCs? Are we going to need a fast Pentium for this? In which case, there's some decently impressive games visually that just use software rendering on a fast Pentium. So it's not clear yet what exactly is going to happen here, but it's exciting.
On that cliffhanger.
It's a cliffhanger.
Will it work?
Will it work? Oh, will it work is a great question. No one's heard of NVIDIA. Who are these people that picked up all this venture funding? Well, they're making 3D accelerators. So
I just think the whole concept, it's very mid-90s and cute that you have, as you said, your spreadsheet computer and you plop this card in and it makes it fun,
That's the idea.
And more even than fun. It's sort of like the concept. Obviously, it'll make more sense when they announce the Sega partnership, but it's like you drop sort of a Sega Saturn into your hopefully Pentium computer.
Right.
And it's just so cute in mid-90s. Like, it reminds me, at the same time, they had boards that you could put in your PC to make it a Mac, and they also had boards you could put in your Mac to make it a PC. Right. And it kind of reminds me of that, where it's like the whole other computer is like on one board,
on a single board,
shoved in there. Yeah.
It's called having it both ways, and it's very expensive to have it both ways, and it's not always the best experience in either side to have it both ways. But I mean, yeah, this is the 90s. You can turn anything into anything else for some amount of money.
Well, that is until Steve Jobs comes in. Then my examples are dead. I think it's like first day as CEO. Hold now.
Yeah, all over. But yeah, anyway, I mean, this is an interesting time. So the other item I want to put on here. So nVIDIA has said, hey, we have a new 3D accelerator coming out. At this time, based on my reading of the June issues of PC Magazine, Matrox has started to actually advertise their Millennium PCI graphics card. I think they have a VLB one too, but the Matrox Millennium is a very interesting card because it's a 64-bit card, like pretty much all the other sort of, high-end but not highest-end accelerators, GUI accelerators. But it's not focusing on the same things that those GUI accelerators are focusing on. So when PC Magazine first reviews this thing, they kind of shrug their shoulders and give it sort of a middling review, because if you look at the Matrox Millennium compared to the Imagine Revolution 128, the Imagine 128 128-bit number 9 card. I can't remember.
There's a lot of numbers there.
All of their stuff is based on the Beatles, and so I get it really confused what it's called. But anyway, number 9 Graphics has a card called the Imagine 128, which is the first 128-bit graphics accelerator for the PC. But it's optimized for some specific APIs and specifically for some graphic editing and some CAD stuff. And if you're using those graphics programs, then it is the fastest solution, especially if you're doing true color image editing, right? It is the fastest solution. But as a GUI accelerator, in terms of your Windows performance, it's only so-so. And in DOS, it's worthless. In DOS, it's not fast at all. It has some sort of basic DOS text mode support and VGA mode support, just so that you can see your BIOS screen when you boot up the computer. But there's no effort put into that, no interest in tweaking its performance, especially not for gaming purposes. The Matrox Millennium has fantastic GUI acceleration. It's the fastest Windows GUI accelerator there is. Now, no one cares right now because we only have Windows 3.1, and most people aren't running at high resolutions anyway, and they're not doing really heavy-duty stuff in Windows. And if they are, it's using special APIs and a specialized card. And it's also optimized for DOS performance. So this thing gets better frame rates in games like Doom and Quake, especially the high motion DOS games. It's actually it's considerably faster than anything else which is out there, including the S3 Trio 64, which is sort of like the gamer's choice at this point. But nobody realizes that this matters yet. But next year, when Quake comes out, this thing is like 10% faster than the rest of the field in Quake, and it has excellent video quality because it has a separate, discrete DAC, and it has the best Windows acceleration you can get, making Windows 95 experience that much better. So this is a product that is a few months before its time, and it hasn't really been recognized yet what it signifies, that like this is a combination that people are going to care about. But if you look at the successful graphics cards that come after this, they're going to have these sort of qualities as well. They're going to be highly integrated solutions. They're going to have great Windows acceleration, and there's going to be some concern for performance in games, 3D gaming, but also just raw, DOS gaming performance. So that was sort of interesting.
So Matrox Millennium, the best graphics card you can get 95.
Yes, the best graphics card you can get 95 because it has this exotic window RAM, which allows them to get a little bit more bandwidth out of their 64-bit memory interface. Gets them within like 30% of a 128-bit memory interface, which is why Matrox was just like, nah, we don't need to do 128, and they don't do 128 for a long time. So yeah, it's interesting. It basically, like 96, the golden pairing is a Voodoo graphics card and the Matrox, Millennium or some other Matrox card, because you're going to get really good 2D performance and really good visual quality, and you'll get 3D out of the Voodoo. So part of that pairing has already emerged.
Part of that pairing. Well, yeah, I mean, nobody knew how to do 3D computer gaming until the 3DFX. So let's just face it. I mean, I think that explains the nVIDIA here, where, they could have probably made a much better board if it was 3D only, but nobody knew there was a market for that. And or the games. I mean, so,
Yeah,
that's where we're at. We're 95. Everything's very primitive.
Everything's primitive.
It's all going to come together.
Nobody knows what the formula is.
Yeah.
Nobody knows how you're supposed to build a 3D graphics card. Like that is all going to shake out over the next many years. And also shaking out over the next many years is any improvements in general system performance. It is June. On June 1st, Intel releases the Intel Pentium 133, a whopping 13 megahertz faster than the 120, which was released last year.
Well, this is on the new process, right? This is the P54C.
This is so this is interesting. So the Pentium 120 was on the P54CQS process, and only the Pentium 120. And then with 133 on to the 150, 166, and 200, we're on the P54CS process, which right now doesn't appear to be showing us any benefits. It's still 350 nanometers. It's got about the same, TDP. We still have a 66 megahertz frontside bus on this. Like, it's not. Of course, there's an enormous premium you have to pay if you want to get the 133 and get all 13 of those extra megahertz. But I think the important thing about the release of the Pentium 133 and the beginning of P54CS is that it's socket 7 only.
Yeah.
Socket 5 has been it's been sent over into the dust heap. It's been written into the pages of history. And we are moving on, and Intel will never revisit socket 5. It is socket 7 from here on out. And that's actually very important because socket 5 is the last platform that has VESA local bus, which is exactly what the first NV1 accelerator is going to be released for, which was really not a great choice because not even all socket 5 boards have VLB. VLB was more of a sort of socket 3, 46 era sort of thing. Once you had PCI, no one really cared about VESA local bus anymore. And now that socket 5 is dead, really no one should be caring.
Yeah, long live socket 7, and it does have a long life.
Socket 7 lives a long time.
as a high sort of speed to $2 bang for your buck platform, because Intel goes on to big slot things with fancy other chips, and
socket 7 is important because socket 7 is the last it's the last socket that AMD has the technology sharing agreement for. This is the last one. After this, Intel thinks that they're finally free of AMD. They're going to just make a whole new system standard and like a whole new, form factor and everything. They go to slot 1 and they say, bye, you don't get to find out about this one. We don't have to share this technology with you, And so AMD has to spend all this time trying to come up with their own slot, and they end up with slot A. But in the meantime, having sort of been left in the dust after the technology sharing agreement ends, they continue the life of Socket 7 for their K6, K6-2, K6-2 Plus, K6-3, processors, and sort of hack on additional things onto the Socket 7 platform that weren't there before, with the assistance of their exceptional, chipset partners via Ollie and I don't even know.
Probably.
And Sys, yeah. Sys has their own agenda, right? Sys is going for highly integrated solutions, not unlike the 815, but they're doing it with, older generation, system architecture. And yeah, so, right, Super Socket 7, which is what allows Socket 7 to continue long into the future. Not the most stable platform. But it's cool. A lot of retro.
But it was cool and it was cheap, so.
It was cheap, yeah, exactly.
It made it work.
Fry's would have deals for $50. You would get a Super Socket 7 motherboard by some really great vendor like Lucky Star, ECS, Foxconn before it was Foxconn. And some AMD K6-2 processor or something like that. And you could slap together something that would run Windows 98 and have an AGP slot, but God help you if you actually needed that AGP slot to work reliably.
Beggars can't be choosers, what can I say?
I don't know. Okay, do we want to say anything else about June of 95?
No, I think we've said enough. Let's play some games.
We've said so much. Okay.